Hello, everyone. Welcome on this new episode of Education Futures. We are very happy to be with two special guests from Duolingo. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. And we have here some really great expertise on assessment in the age of AI. And this is a topic that is particularly important when we think about learning in the age of AI. How do we assess learners in this new age? And so, Elie and Ina, very good to have you here. Thank you for being my guests.
Happy to be here.
Very nice. Let's start with you, Alina. You are a psychometrician and you are specialized in assessment. Can you tell us more about what a psychometrician does? What is your expertise? And maybe a bit more about your experience in assessment.
My pleasure, Svenia. So actually my background is in mathematics. I have a degree in mathematics, first from Bucharest and then a PhD from Germany. And I work in psychometrics for 20 plus years now. So what does the psychometrician do? Well, when you measure a table, you pick up a meter, and then you try to look at it and say, this is this length or that length. But if you want to measure someone's language skills, someone's math skills, it's a bit harder to pull that out of their head and try to measure it. So what psychometricians do is to measure unobservable things. And in order to do that, they have to identify how to measure. They have to think about how to pull that information from people's brain, what type of questions they should ask so that the answer is relevant to that measurement. And of course, once they build that measurement instrument, so instead of building the literally meter or whatever in feet you want, we build testing instruments. So that's how, and once we build that, we need to do research on it. Is it true that the thing I build actually measures language or actually measures math or something else? So that's called validity. We have to work on validity studies and gather evidence that what we said we would measure, actually, it is what we measure. And then the next question is, how accurately are you? If you tell someone that, well, your English skills are, and I'm going to make up a number here, a score equivalent of a score of 140, well, that's very high on our Duolingo English Test scale. Well, that's a strong claim. So what evidence do you have that exactly the score? What's the reliability of that measurement? So we have to work on figuring that out as well. And then last but probably not least is if different people take the test at different points in times and both of them have 140, are those 140 the same? Do they mean the same thing? So this is what we call comparability. And this requires quite a lot of math and statistics to put together and make that happen. So that's pretty much who we are. So measurement scientists, but for unobservable variables and skills.
I love that definition. It's quite poetic.
Imagine a brain that you're trying to measure. It's amazing.
Trying to pull it out, like Harry Potter had those memories pulled out. Well, if we would have that would be so helpful. Maybe I will help us with that.
Exactly.
And so, are you working on every assessment that is on the Duolingo app? Or are you working on specific assessments outside of the Duolingo app that we all know and have used at least once?
So Duolingo has several products, how we call them, and it has a large group of products in the area of learning. And this is the one you are referring to, the app, where we have languages and we also have chess and music. But in addition, there is another type of product, and this is the Duolingo English Test. The big difference between the two is that the Duolingo English Test is a high-stakes test, meaning that the test scores matter to test takers and to the institutions that accept those scores. as opposed to the learning app, which help everyone have a good time, learn the languages on their own time and for their own pleasure and interest. With some exception, there are people who really want to learn and because they need it for work. So the point of the stakes of the test made a very large difference. So we work on the Duolingo English Test. So the users tend to be quite different from the learning app. And as I mentioned before, the consequences of the test are significant for all participants in this small ecosystem. Well, actually, not that small, but
Bigger.
within this ecosystem that is growing. And we do work, though, on building learning measures for the learning app as well. So I don't know if you're familiar with the video call for Lily, with Lily. Yes, okay. So we are building measures for evaluating people's skills in different languages based on the conversation with Lily. We are also in the process of building some measure about for the other skills like reading and listening. So those are still in progress. And of course, everything is done in collaboration across different groups. So actually, for each project, we have probably 10 people involved.
And then, great. And Elie, can you tell us a bit more about you and then about the Duolingo English Test? Because you're also directly presenting this test to a number of institutions in Europe. So, yes.
Thank you, Svenia. Sure. So, Eddie, I was many years in consulting before actually I was on the tech world. I was working a lot with higher education. So my clients were actually either governments directly or, institutions, universities across Europe and other parts of the world. And the topic of assessment was a main topic there because they wanted to understand how to admit people into the programs, how to make sure we are measuring the level of English or math or anything during the program, and how to make sure we have good exit tests as well so that they can go into the working world, basically, environment. I did this for many years with some consulting firms, and then I joined LinkedIn, actually. So I stayed with LinkedIn a few years, where it was a bit the same topics, how they can understand their alumni, their student base, people that want to join them. And then all of that, I would say, led me actually to Duolingo. So I joined recently the Duolingo English Test, so working in the team with Alina, and I am in charge of the European market. So basically, I talk to governments and universities, again, all the time, and to make sure to understand basically if they do accept the test already, and I'm going to come back to the test, what's going on, what are their feedback, how they're using it, because you have many different use cases, admission being obviously the biggest one and the high stake one, like Alina mentioned, and the one that don't accept us yet. How can we ensure, that they will accept us in the future? What can we do, etc. And of course, partnerships across the continent. At the end of the day, Europe is very big, and you have specificities per country, obviously. So the Duolingo English Test is an official English language test. The same way IELTS, TOEFL, TOEIC, Cambridge, I don't want to cite too many because I'm going to forget some, do. There's a huge difference with the others. Many differences, but the huge one, obviously, and Alina, feel free to add to that, we're going to go through it in detail, is that it's a 100% online test. So this means that you can do it from home, from anywhere on the globe. You don't need to go to a test center, and you don't need to be live with an instructor or a professor or a proctor when you are doing it. So this is the main difference. Having said that, because it's a big difference, it's a strength today. It's a difference, but it's a strength. So when we talk about security, we're going to go through it in details about assessment, how we assess during the time, duration of the test, cost of the test, that is obviously lower. All those become strengths of the Duolingo English Test. And this is a big differentiator because you have people in the world that cannot afford, whether it's physically or financially, to go to a test center, right, and do an English test. So I would say this is our big difference. And we have almost 10 years of age, so we are relatively young in the industry, but not that.
Exactly. 10.
Exactly.
This year,
This year.
celebrating that anniversary.
Exactly. exactly. In summer, it could be finally the double digit. And so we are relatively young, but not that young either. And we are accepted more and more, and we're going to talk about it, by universities and governments across the globe, because there's a demand, right? With everything crazy happening in the world, AI coming more and more into place, etc. There is a demand. So today, just to give you quick numbers, we have more than 6 universities, for example, accepting us through the globe. We have, I don't know, almost 400 programs in Europe. We have big names, in the Ivy Leagues, in the big business schools in Europe as well, are accepting us, because this is the trend of the future, right? And this is what we're seeing on the end of the students as well that want to pass it. So this is how universities are also following that trend.
And so what is would you say, technically speaking, the biggest add-on or innovation in the Duolingo English test compared to other tests?
So Mikey,
We take the perspective of the student. So I understood it's completely at home. What would you say are other big characteristics for the student?
Short-term check, the test, because it's an adaptive test. So very quickly, within the first few questions, the test adapts to the level of ability of the test taker. And with that, we managed to measure the same construct much faster, but with the same accuracy than other tests that are out there. And maybe I should have mentioned that in my previous life, I worked for other tests. So actually, I worked on TOEFL and TOEIC, the big test, for a number of years. So, actually, I worked on pretty much all types of tests. Not only language assessment, but many language assessment and international tests. And I can make that comparison. So I know what works and what doesn't, and where the differences show up. So being a shorter test while maintaining the quality of the measurement is definitely a plus for the Duolingo English test. Then there are some innovations perhaps under the hood, if you want. One of which is that we use interactive tasks. So what that means is that instead of just measuring through multiple choice questions, we actually put the test takers in situations that would elicit their language skills in a much more authentic way. For example, they can listen to a lecture and then, respond to some questions. So it's a multimodal type of task. That's our listening task. Or we have a writing task where we give test takers a prompt. Then in real time, with the help of AI, we take a look at what they wrote and then suggest another topic so that they can expand on that particular response, which will help them in the end as well. But it also recreates a situation where people use, say, during their studies, might be together, they receive feedback or prompts from their peers or professors. So, and now most recently, we launched an interactive speaking task where the takers will speak with an agent. And again, the agent will adapt very quickly to the level of ability of the test taker and maintain a conversation so that we can evaluate precisely how well somebody speaks.
Amazing.
AI agent, just
It is an AI-based agent. Yeah, not a free agent, meaning we do constrain our AI. Again, remember, we are a high-stakes test. So we need to make sure that there are two things we need to make sure. Well, so multiple, but a few that people talk about. One is we need to make sure that the AI agent would not say anything inappropriate. So we need to be very careful about that. The second thing, we need to make sure that the AI agent doesn't hallucinate in some unexpected ways. And the third thing that is not so visible from outside, we need to make sure the type of conversations and questions that the agent asked are comparable across test and across conversations. Yeah. So that's a bit harder it's not easy to see from outside, but we as the developers need to be very careful. So that's why all of our AI is actually constrained.
I see. So it's a completely personalized test. So no one size fits all, basically. It's just, it's personal. But how do you know that this person is at this level if you directly adapt to their level, if you don't challenge them maybe one level further so you can see if they are capable of going there? So how do you make sure that you have at the end of the test the exact level of this person?
Magic. Psychometrics, that's the word. Close to magic.
Yeah. Like Harry Potter.
Exactly. So the way an adaptive test is built actually depends on how they answer to the previous items. If they responded correctly, then the next item is going to be more difficult. If they respond incorrectly, then the next item is going to be a bit easier, and so on. So it moves like this, up and up, down, until it stabilizes. So that's the principle, simply speaking, of the adaptation in an assessment.
And do you think all standardized tests should be adaptive now? Or do you think there's still value for having a standardized test, one size fits all?
Well, I mean, I would say in the end, it depends. There are pros and cons in specific contexts. What I mean by that, in order to have a good one size fits all test, you have to have a very long test because you have to cover the whole breadth of abilities. Now, as you know, nowadays nobody wants to sit for a test for 3 or 4 hours. You don't have to. So adaptive tests are friendlier, provide a friendlier format for test takers, but pretty much for everyone in that context. However, they are not that easy to build. So you need a very high level of expertise. Again, those magicians, psychometricians come into place, and then again, it depends on the context. So let me give you some other examples. If you want an assessment and you don't have the resources to build one, then of course you will do the simplest possible assessment, which will be a longer test. And who knows, maybe even on paper, just to solve your particular problem with very, very few resources. But if you have the expertise and the knowledge necessary for building an adaptive test, nowadays, which, I don't see why people wouldn't do that. And we see this. We see it like, our competitors are trying more and more to develop tests that are shorter, to have them more adaptive. So yes, we've seen that evolution. I want to point out that adaptive tests are actually very old.
True.
Very old. They were developed in the 70s.
Really?
Yeah. On paper.
On paper.
Well, no, I mean on paper in research, research publications and papers. And they have been used for a long time by some assessments. But again, the technology was not quite there yet. And the biggest problem is related to the item bank, all the items that are available for testing, which you probably are going to ask about that because that's where AI is super helpful. So what happened with the first adaptive test was that they had an item bank of about, I don't know, maybe 200 items. And then some of they were not even traditional cheaters. They were actually a company trying to help their students succeed. And they sent people to learn the content. And then all content pretty much was available to that company
Covered everything.
within a few months, maybe a year. And then the validity of the test went down, obviously, because if everybody knows what's on the test, then and they can prepare exactly with those particular prompts, then you can't really have a valid assessment, a valid test. So it was very difficult at that time to have a very good adaptive test, although the algorithm and the math behind it was very solid and appropriate. So it's interesting to see the history. And nowadays, obviously, we can handle that.
Mm. Now, you are presenting and selling the Duolingo English Test to governments and institutions. You said that 6,000 universities across the globe now accept the DET. What about, and I would love to hear about Europe, where you're based. How do universities react to these, new types of tests, AI power? Do you see some fears, or do you feel that they are super open to it and they adopt it quite quickly?
It's a good question. There's a bit of both, I would say, depending on the country, the university, etc. I want to highlight that when I say Europe, I'm focusing on continental Europe, so outside the UK, where we were already existing for many years. Because what happened actually is that, like almost every test, they are built and we become aware of them before Europe, for example, in what we call the Big Four. So the Big Four speaking countries or continents. So basically Australia, UK, US, and Canada. And then it comes to the other markets, Europe, Latin America, Asia, etc. So why am I saying that? It's because naturally awareness in Europe about the Duolingo English Test is lower. Now, it doesn't mean we're starting from scratch, definitely not. But yeah, I do hear from time to time universities or government telling us, but you are a language app. How come you're doing a test? And to Alina's point, the stakes are different, right? Like you're doing the app from home, you are just testing 5 minutes your English versus an English test that is official that would potentially, decide your admission or your exit from a degree. So I do hear a bit this around the lack of, let's say, awareness about the Duolingo English Test. So this is one that I'm hearing quite a lot. Another one, once they know about the Duolingo English Test, is definitely, being a bit scared. Not about AI specifically. I think we are at a point in time today, and you will tell me, Alina, if I'm wrong, where people are getting used to AI. But it's more about, for example, some institution being a bit scared regardless of the security, right? You're doing it from home. So how can you, make sure people are cheating? And then I guess maybe we're going to cover it, but actually from home, if you have the right setup and the right security systems, it's harder to cheat from home than from a test center. You could argue that, So this is one that I'm getting a lot. And then I'm getting a bit less, but this is where we answer with our research as well around the validity, the assessment, right? Like how are we making sure, for example, when we have an item bank, so people answering questions that are not the same, that we are indeed scoring them the same way. And this is why also we have heavy research, on the topic. We can ask them. So I would say, all in all, it really depends on the journey of awareness of the institution of the government, and then the questions or blockers that they have are a bit different.
So what about, I'm very curious to know about this, the security and the proctoring. What is so how do you convince them that it's safer and more secure to take this test from home?
So I'm going to answer quickly, and then please feel free to add to that, because you know a bit better than me. But no, first of all, something super important, and I think this is a concept of the Duolingo English Test, and this is super important to mention. Yes, it's relying heavily on AI, but not only. Actually, our power really is what we call AI and human in the loop. So it's AI plus human proctoring. Meaning, of course, you have AI that can detect if someone is trying to cheat, if you have a sound coming from outside, if someone is hiding behind you. You have very creative ways of trying to cheat, but we have luckily very creative ways of detecting them. So this is the AI. However, after that, regardless of if the test was detected as a potential cheat or not, you have 100% of the tests that would be proctored by humans. This means, and this is actually, again, one of our saying, that all the tests would go through a human proctoring afterwards. And it's important that it's after, not live, for many reasons. So, for example, you have less bribery, cheating, because you don't know who is going to proctor your test. You know what I mean? And it's a one-to-one proctoring, meaning every single test would be at a single point of time proctored by a human. And then this human would check if indeed those detections from AI were correct or not. And this is the human that will, in the end, certify, the test or not. So I think the power comes from the mix, and this is, I think, maybe in general, concept now. It's a mix of AI and human proctoring. And then we can talk about it later, but we have a couple of systems in place that would check the environment before the test of the student with cameras, mics, etc. Even today, we have a new feature, right? The ear detection, because we noticed that some people put a tiny earbud to try to cheat with someone talking to them. So now we scan the ear.
Creative.
I'm telling you, you have a lot of creative ways of cheating, and we have a lot of creative ways of trying to stop it. So anyway, we scan the environment before, during, and after through our proctors. So this is how that combination of AI plus human is actually very, very strong.
So the results are not instant. You need to wait until you have the human proctor double checking the AI.
True. But even that is maximum 48 hours. So you have your results. You can potentially have them in 12, 24, or maximum 48 hours, which again, compared to our competitors, is a game
So
changer.
fast.
Exactly.
So fast.
Exactly. I don't know if you have anything to add on the proctoring.
No, you covered it.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting to hear the different ways that students try to cheat and how technology can prevent that. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, because think about the test center, for example. Naturally, we think that in the test center we're going to cheat less, but and again, I'm not saying it's one or the other, but in a test center, in some cases, sometimes you have bribery, for example, right? In test centers, you have one proctor for 15, 20, depending on the test center, right, students. So naturally, they will not be able to look at 20 people at the same time. So in some cases, you could argue again that if you are very prepared to cheat, you might be able to cheat in an easier way in the test center.
And if the tests are one size fits all, it means that people sitting relatively close to each other will receive the same
questions.
So again, they might also learn from each other.
I had this live. I'm not going to tell the name of the test, but it was a test where you have to speak at some point, and people speak at different points in time. And I heard at some point someone answered a question, and then a few minutes later, someone else answering the question with exactly what the same person had said. So, you know what I mean? It's not like cheating per se, but like you said, it's maybe not an accurate measure in this case.
Yeah, that's
it can be a cheating per se too if they are
together. Yes.
Actually, in my previous life, we've been working on detecting that type of cheating when people sit close to each other. This is why an adaptive test is actually part of a design to reduce security threats as well. Yeah. And in our approach, we have some scientific papers written about that. We talk about our ecosystem for the Duolingo English Test, and we propose that for any test. But that's how we build it for us. And detecting or preventing security threats is part of the design. So we think about that from the beginning, and we take that into account with adaptive tests, with the way we present the questions, for example. They are not presented in the same format all the time. So there are a lot of things that we can vary to prevent creative cheating.
And I would love to go back to the technicality of it and also to understand a bit more how you use AI. So can you explain to our audience what an item bank is first, and how do you make sure that this item bank is, big enough? And also, is the AI creating new items like instantly, or do you prepare them in advance? Like, how does it work exactly?
Yeah, that's a lot. So we call the items are the questions on the test, and they can be very simple or they can be more complex, like a set of items. In which case, we might call those tasks. So that really make a difference between individual short questions versus things that are a bit more complex, such as those interactive conversations that we call tasks. So how do we create those? Traditionally, before AI, people have brought together experts to write those questions. Sometimes teachers, sometimes professors from universities, depending on the type of assessment and the level for which the assessment was designed. And each test created by humans in that way would cost, especially more complex one and for higher level, would cost somewhere like, I don't know, a few $1,000s per question.
Wow.
So it's quite an expensive development. And because you develop it, people write it the first time, that you need to, gather some data, see if it works the way you think it does. So it's a very complex and time-consuming effort. To create the test in a traditional way now, forever it takes years, to be honest. So what are we doing now different? So obviously for an adaptive test where you need a large item bank, so many questions, this will take years and it's not quite feasible. Why do we need that many? You also ask why we need that many items in the item bank. Item bank is our collection of items, and we have all of our questions there with what we call metadata about those questions, such as this item measures speaking at a level of CFR, Common European Framework of B1. This item here measures reading at a CFR level of B2. And a few more other things there, of course, things that we call statistical parameters from different models that we use for those items. But we don't need to go into those details. So the item bank is therefore a collection of questions, all these questions with their descriptors, this metadata for each question. Now, we need a lot of them because for an adaptive test, the aim is not to have the same question taken by too many people. And you want to make sure, I told you, we consider the design of the test as one of the tools against security threats. So we also want to make sure that even if they learn the items by heart and they give it to all of their friends, that it will still not impact the final results because we have so many items that they can't possibly learn those. We have over 70,000 items in the item bank right now and growing.
Wow.
So it's very hard to learn. To learn such a content. And we have an incredible low overlap in terms of items seen by multiple people. Because almost each test is like a new test for each person. So quite personalized. So then how we do that and how much AI and how much human expertise we use, that was the second part of your question. So we have the experts designing the items first, and they use their expertise in language assessment and in psychometrics, and they are up to date with the existing technologies and the existing science, and that they design the items. If you remember from the beginning when I mentioned that the psychometrician pulls that information from people's heads, the question there is, how do you design those questions so that whatever you pull out of their heads gives you the right evidence for that measurement? And this is what the human designers do. They think, how should I ask the question so that the answer tells me about their ability really, really fast? That's also important. We want everything to be efficient. So those are the human experts. After that, we work with an AI engineer who would help transport this information into, say, prompts for AI and scripts that will put information together. And we have different methodologies depending on the item type, but usually at the time of technology, we try to split the whole complex task into smaller tasks because we learned that in this way we obtain better quality responses from GPT. And then we give different prompts to GPT, like I don't want, I should say LLMs, not GPT.
Correct.
And we do. And then eventually we put scripts together. We put the responses together according to scripts, and we create hundreds of those. The next step is for human reviewers to take a look at what the LLMs produce. And we look at those items in 2 rounds. One is, and all done by humans for each item. The first round is just quality. Make sure that it doesn't say anything crazy. We also fact check there as well to avoid hallucinations. And just to make sure the grammar is okay, the sentences are fine. And then we have another level that we call fairness and bias review, because our test is taken by test takers from all over the world. So we want to make sure that our questions are not too heavily influenced by our own culture, American culture. So we want to make sure that the tests, then the questions are accessible for everyone all over the world. So these panelists that review our items, they are from all over the world themselves, which is a strength in this case, and help us get a better understanding of what may work or what doesn't work in different cultures. After that, we put the items together, and then we eventually test them again with real students before we put them on the test. We build different technologies around that. For example, we built something called the Item Factory. The Item Factory refers to the whole process that includes automation, AI, and human management. So all together, like in a factory, which is why it's called the Item Factory. And so that's one piece. We also have another piece of technology. I think now we call it Pixie. But please don't ask me exactly what this PIXC would stand for. But the idea behind this, it's a platform for item experimentation, PIX, and for piloting exams, I believe. So that's the Pixie.
Yeah.
So we have it at the end of the practice test, and we ask for consent, and we ask the staker if they want to participate in the studies. And most of them do, because they want more practice.
Yeah.
It's good for them, it's good for us. And very quickly, we can collect quite a significant amount of data from prospective test takers, which actually makes it a very valuable tool for us. So it's quite a complex process. So some people think that if you use the AI, everything is very easy. You just tell the LLM, do this, and then ta-da,
You have all the questions.
you have all the questions. Unfortunately, we are not quite there yet. So there is a lot of work and a lot of human expertise that goes into a quality assessment.
I see. And do you think we will get there at some point? Or do you think there's always going to be this human touch needed?
That's a hard question about the always, I would say probably for the foreseeable future, yes, we still need humans. Definitely. Humans are maybe not always in the loop, more perhaps fewer loops, but definitely human governance of the whole process. So when I present at different conferences, for example, I would mention that in the end, it matters less who does the work. It matters much more whether the quality is appropriate. And that's why I also build a lot of quality control tools, systems, processes, so that we ensure that the quality is aligned with the standards for high stakes exams, and emphasize more that part than exactly who does what. Because even an item is well developed, it means that nobody should be able to tell whether this was developed by a human or by the machine. So therefore, what matters really is how good that item is.
And how many do you have again? How many?
Over 70,000 and growing.
So it means that humans have overseen that these 70,000 items. That requires a lot of work and a lot of time. And yes.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine. Is there something, like if we come back to AI, but with a like more meta view of how AI is evolving, and how fast the adoption is in higher education in particular. Elie, you talk to a lot of universities, a lot of institutions and governments. How do you see the AI adoption curve? Like, do you feel that universities are, there yet, or do you still feel that there is some backing down on AI? What do you hear?
So I think the stereotype that universities usually go way slower than, for example, private sector on AI is not that true anymore. Of course, you still have processes, universities, etc. But usually, I think we reach a point, and this is for everywhere, where kind of accepting that AI is here. So how? The question is more. It's not anymore yes or no. Should we adopt it? But more, how are we going to adopt it, and where are we in the process of adopting it? Now, you have still specificity. So, for example, and I'm trying not to generalize, but for example, business schools are usually a bit more ahead, right? They tend to be more innovative. They have also maybe sometimes more funding, etc., than other schools. So this, we see it on our tests as well. Like usually they are aware of us faster. They're okay using us faster. They test their things internally as well faster. But I think the trend is that in general, universities are very open now, less and less blockers. And I can give you a few examples, but for example, they think about now AI in their classes, in their courses, right? How to do things, for example, from home, not only in the classroom. And if it's from home, how can we make sure it's inclusive for everyone? They think about it as well in their admission process, not only for the English test, so obviously with our test, but not only. So for example, some universities already think about and use AI bots for interviews, through the interview process, or how to review a bit also the admission, the application of people. So those are positive points, but naturally they are also scared of cheating. Like when you are doing an interview from home with a bot, or reviewed by a bot, how can you make sure that you don't have cheating? And it's quite interesting because then they come to us asking us, look, you have a test that since day zero, you tried to prevent cheating and you have AI in it. How can you give us, I would say, tips, tricks, on our interview or admission process? Because we are trying to use AI, trying to do it online, and we see a lot of cheating. So I think they accepted AI, but we still, of course, some blockers around cheating, etc., that they are trying, to uncover the same way we did maybe a few years ago, and now they're trying to do it as well.
Is there something that scares you when you think about how AI is so fastly developing and taking over some parts of learning in general? Do you have any worries on the future of learning when you see the rapid advancements of AI?
So that, or
I think this is general.
yes.
Not really. I think it will change. It will change how we learn. It already does, actually. It will change how we will assess. This is why I emphasize the interactive tasks that we put on the test. I would say these are the precursors of the tasks of the futures, where they would be much more immersive going forward. So I think and we will accept the fact that not only people prepared with the help of AI, but in some instances, they will work with AI. So such as our interactive speaking task where they interact with AI, and that is very constrained right now. I can imagine that will be much more authentic and much more and less constrained in the future, because we'll figure out different ways to maintain that comparability. So I think as AI evolves, I think our ability to have a test that reflects the way people actually use AI or their skills together in real application will be much better. So I'm not concerned about, obviously things will change, but can we keep up? Yes, for sure. I'm an optimist. I also believe that it's very powerful. It's like fire, Yes. Where would the humanity be without fire? And it has always been very dangerous. So that's how I look at it. It's extremely powerful and it can go wrong, but it can also be tamed and we all have a responsibility here. We need to make sure that we maintain the due diligence and that we emphasize quality and quality assurance for everything we produce in any domain, not only assessment, but in teaching and learning and everything. I know that universities seriously are struggling right now because they are they are struggling in what to teach
Yeah.
and how to teach
Yes.
and how to handle the homework.
Exactly.
And, what I think will be helpful, and there are researchers who have been working on that for years. I mean, I myself, before joining Duolingo, I worked on collaborative problem solving with agents, and that was 10 years ago. So there has been quite a lot of effort into how you would measure this human skills in complex situations like that. And I think that's probably going to be part of the future. So how do you take that help of AI into account when you analyze what humans produce? And that's where other type of skills will become important, including, to be honest, management, because you become the human in charge with, say, even AI agents help. And you have multiple agents, and you will need to make decisions on what to choose, what to accept from those suggestions, what to reject, how to present the whole package. So there will be skills that will come into place and that we will need to figure out how to measure that will replace the measurement of just the output and the product of a particular person interacting with a particular question. It's going to be a bit more complex than that. So that's how I look at it. We are not quite there yet, obviously, although there is good research happening. And all of the things that I mentioned, collaborative problem solving with agents, collaborative or management of the agent infrastructure, obviously interactive tasks. So that's where I see the Duolingo English Test being at the forefront by adapting this interactive task with an eye open on, well, can we make it more authentic, more immersive? Can we expand to, as I said, management of skills? So we'll see. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I see that. I like that. Elie, you want to add something?
No, I completely agree. And I'm personally not scared. And I think something super important that I mentioned is that as long as we manage or govern it, so I think the governance part of it is important, we are still kind of, again, the end of the process, right? And we get to say yes or no. But we have to be like responsible, right? So this is why I'm not scared. Is because we are still in the loop or in the loops all the time, although we have crazy innovation coming. And I love your fire image. I think it's about that. It's like you can grow it, but in the end of the day, you are the one handling it. And if you want to turn it off or make it less strong, you can. So I would say this is why I'm also in this case positive, more positive than negative at least.
Yeah. And Alina, I had a question coming when I heard you speaking. Do you think every skill can be assessed? Because I'm wondering, and we often have this debate with other guests, can we assess critical thinking? Can we assess creativity? Can we assess empathy? Can we assess all of these? Because English, I see how we can assess English with different levels that there is, but do you think it's also possible to assess the soft skills?
Well, yes, I think it is. Again, there is a lot of research, and I was fortunate to be part of the grant that we got from OECD for PISA many years ago on creativity, talking about soft skills. So that was the first large-scale assessment that we built for, all the participant countries, so in multiple languages for creativity.
How do you assess creativity?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first you need to define, because that's part of the difficulty with the soft skills, is the definition. You ask 10 people, you are going to get 10 different definitions. So it's less about trying to cover everything that creativity might stand for, and more agreeing that for that purpose of a definition. And in that particular example, the definition that was adopted was not, are you Michelangelo, but more what would be defined as creative in the everyday life. And often that goes with out of the box solutions to everyday problems, or out of the box uses of common objects. And so it was more around those. Obviously, it's a limited purpose, it's not creativity. But that's part of the problem with all of this. And another area where I worked more was collaboration, collaborative problem solving. And also very difficult to define. And we worked on some definitions, and then we built measurements for that definition. For example, from us. Remember, I'm a math person, and so from that perspective, the way we worked at that time on collaborative problem solving was to express collaboration as a function of the interaction. So if you have a diet, so two people working, solving a problem together, part of the measurement of collaboration was the level of interaction between those two people. There are other definitions, and you can add or not, but I think the most important part is to define what is what you measure. There are other groups in the world right now working on measuring critical thinking. So that's another soft skill. That is actually super important in the times of AI, being able to judge whether what AI says with confidence makes sense.
Right.
So you need to think critically. So there is a group in London, actually, a company called Macat, and I've been working with them, trying to figure out and help them measure critical thinking. And I was on their board, actually. And then I helped them also thinking about translations and for using AI for generating some of their items. All of these things. So I gave you 3 examples. I gave you the pizza example with creativity, the collaborative problem solving that I worked before, the critical thinking. So all of these examples require clear definition and need to be modest in the sense of accepting that it won't be everything that humans understand by either of this. And then carefully building tools to measure that, designing the questions again in such a way that the evidence you receive is indicative of those unobservable skills. So that has been the strategy so far. It is still difficult, and it's still difficult to do it at scale, though it gets a bit easier with the technology that we have. Not only AI, but also just the platforms. The ability to design and create this interactive task is nowadays much easier than 10 years ago when I was working on collaborative problem solving. So I think that's another area of research in learning and assessment that is going to be probably very successful in the next few years.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. I feel so lucky, to work on all of these interesting things. And someone pays me that,
I'm just lucky working with people like you, but
Oh, thank you.
You found your ikigai.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's
When all the good things come together.
exactly. That's amazing. So, what are the future developments of your team? Are you going to, of course, make the DET even better and even more innovative with innovative tasks? Are you going to create other tests, maybe? What are the next steps?
Well, definitely, we want to stay relevant and in sync with how society develops. So definitely we want to go towards more immersive experiences while keeping the test relatively short, very personalized. So those will definitely stay as features that we are interested in doing and maintaining. So that's one idea. Then, yes, we also are considering more accurate measures for learning in the app. So we are going to build not full tests. We are going to build more um, systems of measurement that are not visible to learners. So, but at the end, you probably are familiar with the Duolingo score that we have it on LinkedIn, and that we talk about it. So we are going to work to make sure that the Duolingo score will also reflect people's ability to speak if it's about a language, and not only the progress. So right now it's a good indicator, but we want to make that even more accurate. So these are in the short term.
Amazing. Amazing.
I don't know if Elie, what about you? What do you see?
Yes, it's a good point. Definitely, those are the focus points. And I think, by the way, to your point, the score today in the app is actually the same scale of the score in the Duolingo English test. So it's on purpose that it's the same score because we want something to become almost universal. Our CEO Luis always talks about something standard, that it's a standard measure that one day you would say, I am 130 in Duolingo, regardless of the language, for example. But yes, we want to focus on continuing building and improving our English test. I do see, though, to your point, I do see some universities, governments in Europe, for example, naturally, because then you have other languages, coming to us and asking us what you mentioned. Will this Duolingo English test become or will we add to it a Duolingo French test, right? Duolingo German test? We don't have anything on the roadmap yet, but to Alina's point, because in the app we are developing that score more and more and become accurate on all those other languages, maybe in the future it will become easier actually. And we have also all these research already, right? And everything on the Duolingo English test regarding assessment and security, etc. So potentially using those together, we might be able to build it. I see the demand almost every day, right? But for the moment, we're focusing on the score and the Duolingo English test. In the future, it might become easier to build those other tests.
Yeah, we actually piloted with a French and
Exactly.
Spanish.
Really?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Nice.
we did that, and but we haven't continued that work. That was a while ago.
Yeah.
But for the short term, I want to mention our new edited volume about the Duolingo English test. It's coming out this year for our anniversary, for our 10th anniversary. So it's a volume will be published by Routledge, and will describe many of the innovations that we made to the test. So it's a bit more academic, but not too heavy. So we try to maintain a balance there so that we have a broader audience.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So that's coming out this year. So we are very happy about that.
I will link the book when it's published.
I was the show
notes. Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
And last question, who should we have on this podcast next? Do you have anyone in mind who has really interesting reflections on the future of learning in the age of AI or the future of higher ed, or someone who's a thought leader, a thinker, or a doer, an operator in this field?
So I work with a really fascinating company from Europe. It's called eKids. eKids is it's a company, it's an edtech startup that I've been mentoring, and they developed a really interesting technology that understands young children's speech in multiple languages, and they also help those children learn how to read. And they are based in Munich.
Amazing.
So I would say
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I also work staying with Europe. I also work with a company that I think is very interesting from Bucharest. It's called Next Labs Tech, and they have robotics competition for schools, for kids. And they have not only Romania, but also countries around. And they also use adaptive testing. They also use AI to generate questions for those STEM assessments. So that's another interesting thing that's happening in Europe. I'm sure there are a few others that I might not know, but I know these two quite well. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Excellent.
Yeah. If you want about Duolingo, well, we have a big group of innovators there. So you name it, and I'm sure they will find the time. So, on my team, for sure, we have many good people there. Language experts, more psychometricians if you want. Yes. And also on the learning app, we also have people who work on chess. We have people who work on math learning. So then we have in London, we have now new colleagues
On the music
on
side.
the music side and games for building for music. So those are very interesting too.
Amazing.
So let me know. I'm happy to make intros for all of this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, thank you both for being my guests today. I just love how passionate you both are, and also the amazing work that you're doing, because it's incredible to see that assessment can be done so efficiently. It's in a such innovative way. So well done on this work.
We are passionate. It's true. In the end of the day, it's a topic I always say that we are impacting, we want to believe, and we think we're impacting also people's lives, and we have amazing stories where people were not really genuinely not able to go to a test center because of war, because of poverty, because a lot of things, So I'm not saying we're going to solve all the problems of the world, but on our scale, we generally try, to make accessibility easier to a lot of people. So this is why also you feel that we are passionate, because it's a work, we are lucky to be in a work where we can see impacts, and this is important, I think.
Yeah, and we work, that would be Emma would be another big person. We also work with the refugee groups and provide our tests in many cases for free to different groups that help refugees all over the world. And at some point, just to give you an example, on the Duolingo side, the language that was most learned in Sweden was Swedish.
Exactly.
Because of the refugees who were, went to Sweden and they were learning the language. So it's once you learn about this direct impact on people's life, you feel, you feel more motivated to contribute and make it easier for everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you.